Well, hello and welcome back to the Andrew Eborn Show, where I'm delighted to be joined by the wonderful Chris Braide. How are you doing, Chris?
I'm good, thanks, Andrew. How are you?
Hey, not too bad. I mean, we're just admiring your backdrop, because it's normally bookshelves and things like that.
That's right.
But you've got your curtain up there. You know how to live, don't you?
I thought I'd be professional, I could be anywhere, couldn't I, really? With
Yeah. Well, where are you? Where are you today?
I'm actually in West Sussex. I was in LA for 10 years and I've moved back. It's been here about 2 months. So I'm currently in West Sussex.
Well, I grew up in West Sussex. I grew up in a place called Bracklesham Bay on the south coast near Chichester. Whereabouts are you in West Sussex?
Not far from Chichester. I'm in Grapham.
Oh, I like Grapham. Oh, it's pretty good. So you moved back from LA, because I remember you moved over there. Interesting. And talk about moving back, extraordinary times. If you moved back virtually a week ago, 1 year ago, on the 10th of February, 2020, Marc Almond, fantastic concert. I loved all of that. That has flown by, hasn't it?
It really has flown by. Yeah, I mean, I was talking to Marc recently about it, and he says it was that was his last proper gig, and none of us knew that was going to be the last show. I mean, gosh, I think about it now, we hugged about 3,000 people that night. It was just fantastic. It was
I reckon it was your fault that that's where it started. Forget
I know, yeah.
Wuhan. It was you.
That's right. It was. We were super spreaders that night. I mean, no, really, it was such a wonderful evening, and actually we'd done a couple of DBA shows as well. So we just never thought that would be it for the time being. So yeah,
and what a night that was. I mean, it is extraordinary. I mean, 10th of February it was at the Royal Festival Hall. You were doing all sorts of things with Marc, and Marc is such a wonderful, versatile artist, and you're doing that stuff as well as your own hits, taking you through all the film schools and things like that. Really emotional time. But what makes it most emotional, as you say, that's the last big gig.
Yeah. And we were planning on doing more. It was such a fun evening. And Marc and I have been working together for about 5 years now. And I love him. I mean, he's such a brilliant kind of...
You did the Velvet Trail album for him, didn't you?
I did, yeah. I saw him interviewed, and he said something, this is about 5-6 years ago, and he said something along the lines of, I'm not going to make any more records. I don't think anyone needs to hear any more albums from me. And I thought, well, let's see now. I thought, I'm not having that, so I kind of sent him some songs, and he loved them. And yeah, we've been good friends ever since. And that evening was sort of, it kind of tied all our work together in one evening, really.
Right.
And it was just really great. Fantastic.
And I love all that sort of stuff. I mean, the wonderful thing, which one of my favorites, I think, was the T-Rex medley. Tell me about your passion for Marc Bolan and T-Rex.
I mean, I've been a huge Marc Bolan T-Rex fan since I can remember. I had Electric Warrior on an 8-track cartridge, which I'd stolen from like an uncle or something. Right. Yeah, and I think Marc Bolan is the star personified, really. I mean, if David Bowie was a great artist, and Blondie was a great artist, but Marc Bolan was a star personified. He didn't try at being a star; he just was it.
Yeah. And
I've always been fascinated with him. I love the way he looked. He sounds like no one else on earth, and I've been a fan ever since, really. It's just a huge influence on me. That's why I grew my hair.
I think this is locks down in lockdown. I think that's what you have to work on that sort of base. No, Marc Bolan, but there are some artists and you've worked with a galaxy of stars, but there are some artists that just live the life. Freddie Mercury was another, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Marc just had that, that charisma, that star quality that so many people, can work at, but he never seemed to work at it. He just had it. He was kind of like Steve Harley from Cockney Rebel once said that, he was born a star.
Right.
He just was it. And he sort of burnt out very quickly, really, which is, I suppose, the fascination for me. And Marc Almond as well is a big fan. We talk about it a lot, Marc Bolan. I think the fact that he died so young has kept that kind of, what would the next album have sounded like after Dandy in the Underworld? Would he have carried on into the 80s, and how would he have handled it?
And it is weird. I mean, why do they die so young? I mean, we talked about the day the music died fairly recently, the anniversary of that again, and remembering how young Buddy Holly was in that tragic sort of situation. And it's the what if moments, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I was playing some vinyl recently. I'm a big vinyl fan, and had lots of vinyl out one Sunday, and I looked at what we were playing. It was Thin Lizzy, T-Rex. There was a bit of In Excess, There was some Amy Winehouse and lots of other things. And I looked, I said to Olivia, who's my wife, I said, my God, I just realized that all these artists that I love are unfortunately no longer with us. And it's my record collection is a cautionary tale, really. It's kind of like what not to do, you know, but beautiful records and beautiful artists.
It is incredible. And what I love about you as well, Chris, is that you have, and Ron Simmons to me, I have such a diverse taste in music. And people like Johnny Marr from the Smiths was sort of sneer at some of the stuff that we like, but I love the Smiths. But you'll go from that sort of stuff. And it's that diversity that is really, really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's interesting you bring up Johnny Marr, actually, because I love Johnny Marr and I love the Smiths. But I did read something, a tweet of his a few years ago, and he said when the Smiths got together, you know, and he said something disparaging, like it wasn't about making concept albums like Yes. And I was thinking, that doesn't make sense to me, because I just love great music, and I love Close to the Edge by Yes just as much as I love The Queen is Dead by the Smiths. Yeah. It's just good. It's just whatever mood I'm in, you know. So I've never been, I think that's the thing about record labels. When I was an artist many years ago, you know, signed to labels, they always wanted everything to be kind of, you know, boxed. Okay, that's great, that track, can you do 10 more like that? And for me it was kind of no, because I was brought up on the Beatles and all those great quirky British bands, you know, and every album that the Beatles put out would be quite eclectic. Yeah. No one track sounded like the next, and suddenly we got into this bad habit of you must do 10 of those, you know, and it must be that kind of thing.
And you're absolutely right, Chris. And there's that, in a way, it's rather like wines, I guess. There's a certain snobbery about music, and the prog rock people won't do the pop, and you have to have these really long things where you're prog rock and really short ones for pop. And the reality is, I love all of those genres, and I think looking at that, it's that diversity which is really appealing, because music is music. You're going to feel in some moods you want to just immerse yourself in an album which tells a whole story, and other things you can have that 3 minutes of perfection, can't you?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I said in recent interview, actually, I mentioned about some of my favorite artists like Kate Bush and Yes, are two examples. So you take a Yes track like Sweet Dreams from the Time in a Word album. I love that song. I love John's voice on it. But Time in a Word album is nothing like Relayer. It's nothing like it. But I love them both equally, you know, for different reasons. Or you take Kate Bush, like, you know, you've got an album like Never Forever with, you know, starts off with Babushka and Delius and all the pop stuff, and then ends with Breathing, you know, which is completely out there and very prog, actually. So I think, you know, the eclectic thing is great. And I love a 3 minute 30 pop single just as much as an 18-minute journey, you know, inside one of an album.
You get that album, and people, again, bands like Queen, who would have something like Bohemian Rhapsody and then something wonderfully poppy in between. So you can do that sort of diversity.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you grew up, the other thing that has happened in lockdown, because it's only a few days after your birthday, February the 6th, 1973, all the way up there in Padgate in Warrington. They always say, it was Socrates actually, Socrates says, show me a child until the age of 7 and I'll show you the man. I know that good old Geoff was brought up around music. His father was an organist, and a choir master. His mother was a piano teacher. What about your upbringing?
I mean, my upbringing was very musical. You know, there's a lot of music in the house. My dad was a musician, and my brother was a musician actually, but although he didn't do it professionally, but it was a very musical house. And I can just remember from really early, you know, listening to the charts, age 4 or 5, you know, and buying 7-inch singles, and it was just, there was always a record player in the house, and music was always the kind of center of social kind of life, I suppose. It all revolved around either a piano or a record player. And it was great. It's just fantastic. I mean, you know, who doesn't like growing up with all that music around them? So that was very
internationally, and Warrington or Padgate in particular. It's in between Manchester and Liverpool. Is probably the best way of describing it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when people ask me, you know, where are you from? It's like, oh God, Manchester. You know, but that's not really true.
You know all the great Manchester bands, and obviously you know all the great Liverpudlian bands. Are there many wonderful bands from Padgate rather?
I don't know if there are many bands from Padgate, but the Joy Division were from Macclesfield.
They were, absolutely. We loved
far away. And my kids, I've got kids now, and they've started getting into Joy Division, and they watched the film Control recently, which is fabulous, the Anton Corbijn film.
Yeah.
And they mentioned Macclesfield. I'm going, that's where I'm from. So it's very become cool again.
Yeah, and there's certain bands who do put these places on the map, which is quite extraordinary. Now you yourself, I mean, you've got a wonderfully diverse career because you started as a performer. Dave Edmunds first spotted you. When and how did that happen?
Dave Stewart.
Dave Stewart. Sorry, not Dave Edmunds. Dave Stewart.
I love Dave Edmunds though. Girls Talk, fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was thinking. Dave Stewart from the Eurythmics, of course, he spotted you. Dave Edmunds was completely different. So how did
he did, yeah.
What you, Dave Stewart?
Sorry, say again.
Oh, so how did Dave Stewart come across you?
I knew somebody was working for Anxious Records, and she played him some demos, and he loved it, and he thought I sounded a bit like Daryl Hall,
right?
Which was, kind of, I suppose, I was trying to sort of, kind of do that thing, that blue-eyed soul sort of thing at the time, I suppose. So that kind of made sense. And yeah, we just got on really well. I went to his place in Seven Dials. He had a fabulous apartment there, and we just jammed for a bit, and I played him some songs, and it just kind of went from there, really. Dave was a crazy, mad, brilliant kind of genius, and he sort of took me out of the sort of the small world, if you like, that I was in, looking out from, and opened the kind of curtains like these.
Right.
He really showed me the world through an altered lens, if you like. It was fantastic. And he'd call me and just say, fancy going to New York now, that kind of thing. And off we'd go, it was a mad, brilliant time. So I made an album with him.
And extraordinary. And I felt a bit sorry for him. I mean, last year, because he had he invested in this thing called the Hospital Club. I don't know if you ever went along to it.
Yeah. I did, early on.
One of the victims, I think, has sort of closed down. I used to belong to that, and because wonderfully creative, the TV, music, and film industry. So.
Oh yeah, he was fantastic. Always there was someone weird and wonderful in the studio with us. I mean, one day I looked around and Lou Reed was there.
As you do, yes.
Yeah. Hello, Lou. Yeah. And another day he said, I hope you don't mind, but Michael Hutchence is coming for tea.
Not Michael again.
Like
there you go.
Exactly. It was fabulous. It was brilliant. I knew that it kind of wasn't reality though. And at some point I would have to go back to my own life. And it was quite enticing, his world. You sort of wanted to remain in it, but you knew it wasn't real. But it was great.
And it is wonderful. I mean, the more people that you meet in the sort of celebrity world, if you like, the more you realize that people are the same. That there are some wonderful people, and there's some people who will have good days and bad days and all that sort of stuff. If you prick me, do I not bleed? If you tickle me, do I not laugh?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
So apart from Dave Stewart, did you ever meet Dave Edmunds?
No, I didn't know, but I did work with Squeeze for a long time, actually, and I know them really well. And I wrote songs with Difford and Tilbrook, and of course Dave Edmunds produced that great album of theirs, or some of it, East Side Story. So I've always liked that kind of music. I like the sort of British, the Ray Davies school of songwriting. I've always been a big fan of, and I know that Dave Edmunds didn't write Girls Talk, Elvis Costello did, but it's one of my favorite records. So interesting you say that, because I do love Dave Edmunds.
Yeah, it's funny. It was.
I've never worked with him.
I knew that there's a record somewhere. He was in your history, which is glorious. But you, I say, you started with having been discovered by Dave Stewart. You started in a band yourself, Producers. Talk to me about that period.
Yeah, Producers was interesting because I was working with Steve Lipson, the producer, on a project of Simon Fuller's actually, and I'd known Simon Fuller for donkey's years since I was a kid, really. Right. So we're working on this record. It was a Will Young thing or something like that, I think. And Steve, in the middle of this session, said, because he knew my history and he knew that I'd had a performer sort of part of my life early on, he said we should form a band and do some gigs. And I said, no, I'm not doing that. I've got that out of my system. I'm not doing that. I'm happy where I am now. I'm in the studio. That's my place of kind of joy, really. And he kept going on about it, and I kept saying no. And then one day he said, well, I've asked Trevor Horn and Lol Cream, and they both said yes. So I said, right, okay, yes then. And that was it, really. We just formed this crazy band called The Producers and played, we did the Royal Albert Hall and stuff, it was really great fun for a few years.
And what a venue, 150 years it's going to be on the 29th of March this year.
Wow. Is that right?
And it's sad. It's sad seeing it empty. I know that they're all hoping things are looking up, but it's very difficult for venues to turn around and do it. But playing the Albert Hall, it must have been one of your favourite venues, isn't it?
Well, it was great. Yeah, I mean, I was there with my favourite drummer and good mate of mine, Ash Stone. Who's just a fantastic player. And I'm looking around. I've got Trevor to one side, and Lowell to the other, and then Steve Lipson, who was a fabulous producer. It was just one of those kind of, okay, well, this is cool. This is fun. It was really good. But ultimately, I left that band because I'd been in it for 4 years, and I decided to move to the US. So that kind of put an end to it, really. I suppose I started the sort of demise of the band, really, but I just had to go. It's one of those things. It was a kind of life decision, but it was great while it lasted. It was real fun.
Well, you still have on your website the gig from Dingwalls on the 22nd of October, or was that wishful thinking, or what happened? Tell me about that gig.
I think it did happen, didn't it? I think the Dingwalls one did happen. There was a couple of gigs that didn't happen. Yeah, it was just one of those things that sometimes you just your internal compass just says, now you've got to go, and that's what I did. And I went for 10 years. I can't believe it's 10 years actually, because it seems to have flown by. But it was a really amazing time, in LA, and it was the right decision for me. Really kind of opened up a lot of doors.
And what was
it was
catalyst for going? I mean, it's quite a big decision. A lot of people sort of think it's paved with gold. Let's go over to LA. What made you decide?
I suppose, I mean, I'd been doing it for a few years, music, and at that point, and I'd had a bit of success with my songwriting career in America, with writing songs with people like Desmond Child, who'd written all the Bon Jovi hits. We'd had a bit of success, and yeah, I just thought, my kids were little, they were sort of babies, and I thought, well, it's now or never, really, because if they grow up too much, then they're going to start becoming established with, friendships and things and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know, I just go with my gut a lot in life, actually, and it's always stood me in fairly good stead. So I just thought, it's now, we should just go now. I didn't think it was going to be 10 years, but it was.
And it is an extraordinary, and during that sort of time, and you've worked with, again, a really diverse collection of artists. Talk me through some of the things. I mean, you've worked with David Guetta, Lana Del Rey, you've worked with Britney Spears, Beyonce, I mean, it's Hans Zimmer. How do they all come about? Does one lead to another? Do you search them out? I mean, they're probably not now, they all search you out, don't they?
Yeah, I suppose there's a bit of that. Managers know where to come if they want that sort of certain type of thing. And one thing I never tried to do is take as the old expression goes, coals to Newcastle. I tried to just do my own thing rather than compete with what those guys were doing over there, because they do that brilliantly, and so I just went with my quirky sort of sort of blend of piano, melody, and the sort of symphonic side of things, and it seemed to work, and people seemed to like it, so I was fortunate, really, that I got a few sort of good things away, and then people hear records. I did quite a few things with Sia and of course Lana, and so then people hear those, and then they want a bit of that for their own project, and it kind of grew like that, really. Well, it was quite organic. It wasn't like
you've done a huge body of work with Sia, haven't you?
I have, yeah. That was through a mutual friend who worked for Clive Davis back in the 90s, and I think it was one of those sort of evenings, some kind of dinner party or something like that, or a housewarming, I think it was. And I got chatting to him. I hadn't seen him for a few years, and he said, "Oh, you should work with Sia. You two get on, I think." And this was really early on, before all the Guetta stuff. So I said, "Yeah, sure." I'm always very open to anything new like that. And so she came to my studio. I was living in Brentwood at the time. And we just hit it off, which is one of those things, a very natural thing. We sat around the piano and just wrote a song quite easily. And then the next thing, it was like, well, what are you doing next week? kind of thing. And it sort of grew from there, really. Very natural.
And it's good when it's natural. And it's always these events where you're bumping in to people, as you say, and you can tell what you like. People come to you, the magical thinker. They come to you for nice chords and surprises, basically, don't they?
I'd like to think so. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I'd like to think so. I always try and sneak a few nice chord progressions in there. Things that really you shouldn't be able to get away with in modern pop music, because everything's become quite, sort of tight. Everyone's sort of kind of, I suppose, borrowing from each other, and I suppose, the same four chords I keep hearing all the time. So I always try and sneak stuff in that is a bit naughty and a bit, kind of the stuff that I like, and I get away with it, and it's just the thrill.
Well, the reason you get away with it, I mean, because artists just love it, because they then, as you say, it's nice chords and surprises, because they think, well, I didn't think that could happen there.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I sort of take things that I loved when I was younger, and I'm still influenced by those things. I still like beautiful chord changes, and so I never get away from that, really. I like to surprise myself, I suppose. It's not contrived. It's like I'm trying to move myself, I suppose, musically when I write. So
and
yeah, it's good to
a wonderful family life there. You talk about your wife and children and things like that. You've also got a dog, and quite a large dog. What's the dog called?
Yes, got two dogs actually. I did say to them, I'm about to do a call, so don't bark.
I love it. Oh no, I
promised me they wouldn't.
What I love about this as well, Chris, is that we're normally inundated with animals as soon as this happens, or the great thing about sort of working remotely now is you get these wonderful surprises where little children come walking in and stuff, which makes it all very, very real. Now talking about some of the other people that you work with, talk to me about Britney Spears, because she's in the news at the moment. How did that come about?
Sia and I wrote that song, actually. It's a song called Perfume, which is a lovely song, and she heard it. I think our manager heard it and played it to Britney, and she loved it. So yeah, that was a great session. Went to the studio in LA, but it's in a basement of a hotel. I can't remember what the goddamn studio's called now, but it's in the basement of a hotel. Anyone watching this who knows will be shouting, "It's that studio!" And yeah, we did the session. It was great. Spent the day with Britney, and she was lovely, really sweet. Lovely. I mean, I haven't seen the documentary that everyone's talking about, and I don't know if I want to, actually.
And that's the problem. I always say, we have lots of people on this show, and I give them the opportunity to correct what's said in the newspapers, because it's that old P.T. Barnum, isn't it? If you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. And so often, they don't let the truth stand in the way of a good story. And you have artists who will come along and they'll be as lovely as everything, and the portrayal in the press is very, very different.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's part of me thinks, who would want to be that famous? I don't know, and it must be very, challenging, especially from that young. I don't know. I always hope that artists feel like they're kind of safe when they come to work with me, and they can just let the guard down, take the ego off and just relax and just make music, because music should be egoless. Actually, it should be just about joy of creativity. So, but yeah, I have worked with a lot of those people that have massive fame, and I just, I don't know how they do it. It's amazing, really.
Beyonce, how did that come about?
Again, that was a song that Sia and I wrote, and they wanted a song for a film that she was making, and so we wrote this song. And it was just a lovely song, actually. It was called God Made You Beautiful, not because we're particularly religious or anything like that, but it was just a nice title, and it's about love, or and Beyonce heard it and thought, this is perfect because it's about my daughter, and she kind of sort of claimed it, if you like, as a song for her daughter, which is great, and she loved it and did a blinding vocal. Lovely people. So I've been really blessed to work with some amazing singers. I think if I hadn't,
and it's a joy, and it is like a sort of snowball, isn't it? I think people talk about luck in the industry, and so often it's what it is the luck is that you can choose who you work with. And I think that's, whilst there are certain things that you have to keep the wolf from the door, you need to be able to feed, put food on the table. And some of the work, I mean, you've done a lot of work in jingles, you've done a lot of work with feature films. Some of it's just work, isn't it? And some you really love.
Yeah, I mean, I try not to do the things that I would think are just work. I mean, obviously, when anyone's starting out in their career, you do things, you know, because it's financially, you know, going to lead you somewhere. And you know, I remember talking to someone in a long time ago, 20 odd years ago, and I said, I'm working on this program called American Idol. They want a couple of songs, you know. And this person, who shall remain nameless, who's also a songwriter and very successful, said, "Ugh, you're doing American Idol. That's disgusting." And I was like 25 or something like that. I was thinking, well, you know, it's good money. Oh, God, you know, I've got rent to pay. And 3 years later, he was doing it, which is just fabulous. I thought, well, there you go, you know. So I've done things like that, which I wouldn't.
No, but it's what we touched on at the beginning. There's a certain snobbery about it. And I think music is music. And if it touches you and it's the soul, and there are two things. Is that I know you don't like to call yourself a professional songwriter. And I think you've picked people up in the past, but you're prolific, but you have, what I say about it's the opportunity. You have the opportunity to do projects that you love, but also recognizing that there have been times that you have to put food on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. I mean, we're all in, unless we're Prince Charles, we're all in that boat, aren't we? But I think actually, you know, I shouldn't really say I'm not a professional songwriter. It just sounds a little bit like an accountant. I suppose that's what I don't like about it. But I am a songwriter and I love songwriting. I grew up with the greatest songwriters in modern music, as far as I'm concerned. Paddy McAloon from Prefab Sprout, you know, is one of my heroes. And, you know, people like that really, I just love songwriting. I still get a thrill out of it. I read an article, it's an Elvis Costello article, and he said he still finds it sort of magical to write and then get to the end and suddenly this thing is there, it's created, you know. And I still get that. I think, look, without a good song, you've got nothing, and so that still stands. A good song never dies, as they say. So I still have a love affair with songwriting. I do a living, you know.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely, and you get involved in, say, do the jingles, very famous jingles, and as well as the other stuff, but also some of the movies that you've done. The Great Gatsby. I was listening to the recording of that, which you had back at the Royal Festival Hall, where you did that one live as well. A great track, Kill and Run. Tell me, when you're doing movies, what's the process? Talk me through that process.
I mean, if you're doing, I did work on an animation film, which was called Leap in America and Ballerina in Europe. That was interesting. It was something I'd never done before. And that was a lot of songs and a lot of incidental music. It took a lot of time. And that's all I would say about that. When lots of people say to me, well, your music's very cinematic, you should do soundtracks. It's a nice idea, but I think it's very time consuming. I still like the quickness of making albums in a way, the flow of it, you know. And that's very much we really like that track for that scene, but we've changed the scene now, we've edited it. Can you chop that out? Can you make that 2 minutes instead of 4? And there's a lot of that, and it goes on and on and on and on. And I'm one of those people that I quite like moving on quickly. You know, I'm very prolific like that. I like the process of doing the new stuff. So working on film is really interesting. It's been great. You know, like you say, Kill and Run is one of my favorite songs that Sia and I have written. It was really great to do that and hear the orchestra and all that sort of stuff. But working on full soundtracks, that's okay. That requires a lot of your time. And I kind of like I like the pop sort of world too much still. Maybe one day though, I'll hang up my guitar and, you know, delve in a bit more.
And it is, I mean, working with people like Hans Zimmer then, I mean, how do your approaches vary?
Not dissimilar actually, because I'm a keyboard player essentially. I can sing, but I'm a keyboard player, you know, and I don't find it difficult to sit at a piano and just come up with a little theme or a jingle or an ID, if you like, and he's very much like that. You sit at the piano and come up with a little thing that, has something. And so it's not dissimilar in some ways. And he's from also a pop background, of course, because he was part of the Buggles, bizarrely, and he produced a Damned album, and not a lot of people know that. So we're all from that kind of essentially love of pop music. So it was great.
Isn't it? It's what you're saying. It's not just pop music, it's the love of music. And
right.
People remember that Hands was absolutely part of the Buggles, absolutely on the Damned connection. They're celebrating their big 40 years and plus now. Extraordinary, this sort of time has flown by. But it's having that rich diversity that I guess just keeps you going, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose that's the thing with also the touring side of things. Although I really enjoy playing live shows over the years, I've never been one of those artists, if you like, or musicians that would want to do 300 shows a year, and a lot of people do. I mean, they'll all be like in tears at the moment because they can't go out and gig. I know some of those guys, they live for living on the road, and that is great, if that's what you like. But for me, it's just too much about one thing. The idea of doing 200 shows and singing the same songs every night, I don't know, I'd go mental. I think I like the diversity. I would. I like to be working on 1 minute I'm working on Marc Almond's album, the next I'm working with Hans Zimmer or whoever, and then I'm making an album with Jeff Downes. It really keeps my
other superb writer. Fantastic
writer.
Yeah,
so it keeps my interest.
Yeah, and it is again working on that sort of diversity, which does make sense. And you're obviously a great networker as well, because it's often at these events, whether it's in the studio or at a charity event somewhere, where you bump into other musicians. And being sociable and you talk to people, and that's where you first met Geoff, was at a charity event, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not actually a great networker, to be honest. I could be better. I mean, a lot of people are absolutely professional networkers, and I'm not really like that. But if I get with the right bunch of people and I feel comfortable and I'm with musicians that I have a connection with, then let me loose. That's kind of when I'm in my sort of happy place. And Geoff and I met because it was going back to the producers' days. Actually, Trevor called me and said, "We're reforming the Buggles for one night. Do you want to come and be in the band?" And I said, absolutely, yeah. What great fun, So we rehearsed for 3 days for this Buggles show at the Supper Club in London, and Geoff and I met there, and we just really clicked. We're both keyboard players, and it's sort of like, what about this chord? Do you like that chord? That kind of thing. It was fun, And I'd been a fan of his playing as well. Such a great player, and his sounds, it's very influenced by his sounds, his symphonic kind of, and almost sort of classical kind of bent as well, So it was one of those things. It was like another great sort of meeting of minds, really. Unfortunately, I was moving to the US.
That not so much network. It's not like in that sort of a double glazing salesman, here's my card sort of way, but more in terms of when you find musicians that you get a vibe. That's why I say it's a real luxury to turn around and say that they're out there. I mean, Geoff, when you talk to him, and I'm talking to him as about all sorts of things as well, is that he will say that you love the Buggles as a band, and you like Video Killed the Radio Star and that sort of stuff. And you were, as you said, you were a fan to start with.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when who wasn't a fan of Video Killed the Radio Star? I remember at the time, my brother's about 8 years older than me, so he would always bring records home, and we'd study them, And I remember when it came out, and I remember buying the Age of Plastic album when it came out with my brother. We got it home, we listened to it, going, "This is bloody brilliant! That these guys aren't one-hit wonders. There's no way. They're clever." The production was great. And I was a huge fan of the sound of it, and the production was fabulous.
I did say at the beginning about Socrates, show me a child to the age of 7, I'll show you the man. You were 7 when the Buggles came out with Killed the Radio Star, and MTV exploded onto the scene. It wasn't just another cable channel, it was the very first video that they played. Do you remember seeing it on MTV? Did you watch MTV at home?
Well, I didn't have MTV at home, no, because you had to have a satellite dish as big as your house at the time. I didn't have MTV, but actually, it was played on MTV many years later. It was actually about 3 years later that they played it on MTV. So I bought it when it came out. I bought that album when it came out. I was really into the Buggles album. I was really into another band called New Music, who were a bit like the Buggles, and the South London band. They had that hit Living by Numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, and I just loved it. I love that quirky British, sensibility. It's very British. And the chords again, and just, Tony Mansfield, great producer. So I was very influenced by those records. And yeah, I was 7, but I absolutely knew what was going on.
You mentioned your elder sibling. How do you get on with your siblings?
I've only got one. I get on fine with him. Yeah, I mean, we still talk about music together, and I mean, I've been away for 10 years, so I've not seen him that much, but we keep in touch a lot. Yeah, I get on great.
And what does he do?
He is a graphic designer, but he's very musical. I mean, he's, like I said at the beginning, he's very, he can pick up a guitar and work chords up by ear, and just, he's got that thing. So the sort of the musical thread, if you like, was very omnipresent growing up.
I think when you have an elder sibling, I've got a couple of elder siblings. I think when that happens, they can influence, they can introduce you to all sorts of music at an early age. I think that's why you can get quite a mature and quite a diverse taste as you're growing up as well. Was he very influential on the music that you listened to?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I mean, we both really were, he was influential because he had the more money at the time, because when I was 7, he was 8 years older. So he would bring records back. But I was also into what I was into as well. And that, it's kind of interesting when I look back now, because 7 is really little. I mean, I've got kids, and I think when they were 7, they were really little. But I think when I was 7, I was absolutely obsessed with the New Music album and the Buggles and all that sort of stuff, and Kate Bush. So he influenced me, but I also influenced him, even though I was only little. It's kind of interesting, really. It was, I suppose he made me feel perhaps that I was older than I was, because he was so much older than me. Perhaps it was that.
Yeah, and it is that whole sort of 80s music explosion as well, which a very interesting time in music. And Marc Almond, well, he was #1 in 81. He was the record of that time with Tainted Love. Do you remember seeing him?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely do remember seeing him. I bought Non-Stop already Cabaret. And I loved the aesthetic of it. I loved the way Soft Cell looked. I loved that Dave just stood in the background with a leather jacket, just looking really serious. It was fabulous. It was sort of anti-rock. It was just great. And they look great on Top of the Pops. Mark's such a great performer. It was very, very sort of magical. It's interesting because I talk to Mark now, and I will say, the way Mark's dad or whatever, sort of behaved when Mark was watching Bolan on Top of the Pops was a bit like my dad when I was watching Soft Cell. A bit like, what's this? And it's great. Pop music should annoy your parents. You shouldn't be going to see pop music with your parents. It should be annoying them slightly.
Well, I think I'm moving on. I've got a younger son and a daughter as well, but they love everything from Green Day to Oasis and all the sort of stuff. I think it's going back to that diversity thing. I think the next generation, they love music that we love. I don't think there's anything I hate. Is there stuff that you hate?
Actually, my kids are suddenly into new metal, and it's really interesting because it's very noisy and very loud. But I just try and see I try and sort of see what they love about it, try and get into their head a little bit. And I actually appreciate it for that. They play it loud in the car. And I think, okay, well, I wouldn't put it on, I'd rather listen to Peter Gabriel personally, but I get the energy behind it. I get why they want to listen to it. It's that youth thing. It's that, it's the sort of little bit of anger in you that you're not free yet. I get why they're listening to it. And so it fascinates me, really, why you gravitate to certain things. I mean, I suppose when I was listening to The Art of Falling Apart by Soft Cell, I suppose that was a kind of like, wanting to annoy my parents or something, apart from loving the songs. But it was like, play it loud and annoy your parents. There's a kind of, there's a good feeling about that. Sorry, parents.
Oh no, they love it. Well, you would have also, I mean, Culture Club when Boy George first came on a few years later and things like that. Do you remember that moment?
Oh yeah, of course, absolutely, yeah. I'm never a huge fan of Culture Club, but I do. I mean, I remember the cultural impact, you know.
It was quite extraordinary on that sort of side. So you then moved to LA in 2010. You'd met Geoff at this charity event, this reunion for the Buggles. You suggested, well, let's collaborate. But you said, I'm actually about to move to LA. It was around that sort of time, wasn't it?
That's right. Yeah. So we did the show and sort of having a drink afterwards. And I said, you know, such an unfortunate timing because I'd literally, the day of rehearsal, been to the US Embassy. And I got like a suit on, you know, when I met him, which is not like me. I don't wear suits. And so anyway, I said to him, I'm moving to the US. We're off. So what a shame. And he said, well, I'm going to be there because I'm working with Yes. He was working on a Yes album. So it was amazing timing, really, because I got there, found the house, set myself up, and then about 2 weeks later, Geoff arrived and we started writing. So in a way, you know, not only did we start our sort of writing partnership there, but he kind of helped settle us in a way, because it was sort of like a friendly face. It was very kind of unique timing, really. And here we are 10 years later, and we've made another one, and I never thought that would be the case.
I mean, you did your previous albums, which you had 3 studio albums and the live album, and this current album, Halcyon Hymns, was all done during lockdown. Talk to me about that.
So after the shows in February, the Marc show and a couple of DBA shows, we headed back to LA, got back, and then pretty soon after getting back, we could feel that something was wrong. You know, everything started to shut down and all the sessions everywhere started to be cancelled, blah, blah, blah. I just found myself with a lot of studio time. And I got a folder of little bits of ideas that Geoff had sent me a couple of months before. And I'd planned on doing something with them at some point after I'd got whatever work out the way. And then suddenly I was in a situation where I had the perfect opportunity to work on these ideas and start writing. It was great, actually. It was a real gift for me as a sort of creative person, because it meant I could just get stuck into something and not worry about, you know, the situation and what have you. Yeah, and it really just came about really easy. The songs just tumbled out. The easiest sort of writing session I've done in years. And I think it really was, yeah.
Creators fall into 2 categories in these times. There's obviously those who are really missing. I think we're all really missing the live gigs, and it's not just those on stage, but obviously the huge industry and the impact on the industry. We're reminded daily about that. But for a lot of people, it's also been a very creative time. It's given a chance to write some extraordinary stuff. And this album is sensational. I love this. It was #1 on Love Among the Ruins, was #1 on the Heritage chart with my good John Reid. So
good old Mike Reid. I have to say as well, you know, Mike, he always played my favorite records. I remember Mike Reid was the only person when I was growing up that played Love on a Farm Boy's Wages by XTC. The only time I ever heard it on the radio. And that is one of their best singles. It's fabulous, that song. And I never heard it on the radio, but Mike Reid played it. And so, you know, good old Mike. He's still playing good records.
He's great. Well, we do a few things together. We do a daily thing together with the Radio Laureate and stuff like that, and do a few TV things as well, which is quite fun. He's been a DJ on virtually every platform, more platforms than King's Cross, I think. It's always good. But he's there and he's champion heritage artists and artists who are not getting the airplay at the moment, because that's the issue, isn't it? I know you spoke in a recent interview. You love doing the music you love. It doesn't matter if there are 10 people buy it or 10,000, as long as you get your music out. The reality is, from the industry, it's massively changed from the heydays, if you like, of the 80s and so on and so forth, when loads of records were being sold.
Yeah, it has changed. And, you know, the thing is about, you know, you have to be realistic, and plugging to national radio is expensive, you know, so you have to sort of work out why you're doing it. Are you doing it because this is like your main source of, you know, your main career, your main source of income, or whatever? I don't know. I think I just like the fact that our records, Halcyon Hymns, skyscraper souls. They're made without any pressure. They sort of, they're naturally birthed, if you like, and so the idea of putting so much sort of pressure on it and plugging it to national radio seems to put too much weight on it for me. If somebody wants to play it, that is fabulous and fantastic, but it's not the main drive behind it is not to sell 1 million records. I wouldn't be upset if we did, but it's not the main reason behind it. It's just to make music that we really believe and really love. And I spend a lot of time working on other people's records, and that's great, and I love that. But sometimes there's a little piece of me that keeps something back for myself, and that's very much that album. But to spend a fortune plugging it to national radio, I just don't know if that's realistic, really.
And so, I mean, it's also, that's the bit of the industry, I guess, you don't really like having to get up early for a breakfast show or things like that. It's not really part of the creative process, is it?
I mean, it's not so much the thing that turns me on about, what I do, but if I had to do it, then I would do it, because I think, I do believe in the record, so I think when you believe in something, those things that you don't necessarily like doing as much are slightly easier, aren't they? If you can talk about something you're passionate about. So I wouldn't be against it.
But it's going back to what you were saying about Britney and Beyonce and having to be upfront as the star all of the time. It means that it's very difficult to be yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's the genius behind a lot of what Bowie was doing, for all those years, that he would create characters. And he said once he created Ziggy Stardust or Aladdin Sane, he could then be himself. He could suddenly relax on stage, and it makes total sense, really. I've always thought, it would be interesting to have had a different name and not just be called like what I'm called. And I suppose a band is that, and I suppose DBA, Downs Braide Association, or whatever it is that kind of mask, if you like. And so it feels less, I don't know, I think there's it's less personal, I suppose. It's a thing rather than the person, So yeah, I don't know really. Like I say, I don't know how people like Britney and those kind of people handle that as well as they do. I mean, and obviously some people don't handle it so well. I think we're designed for a certain level of attention, but
have you asked them? You say you don't know. Have you asked them?
I've had conversations with people in the studio and stuff, but I don't know if I've asked them as direct as that. I just try and make them a cup of tea and just make them feel comfortable. I'm just down to earth, and I think that people benefit from that, hopefully, when they work.
As you say, when you're in this,
because it's all,
and that's the secret, isn't it? In the studio environment, it's still very professional, but everybody can just, doesn't matter what's going on in the outside world, you're there to do a job and just enjoy that, don't you?
Well, that's right. And studios were always like that for me. When I was working in London in my younger days, hello dog.
We should say bring the dog in. I want to see what sort of dog.
But studios were always like that for me. They were always a place where you could go and get away from reality. Whatever was happening in your real world would somehow disappear as soon as you walk down those basement steps into your studio, and you sit with the engineer and just get stuck into a bit of music, with the air conditioning on. Perfection. That was my idea of heaven.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite studio you like to work at?
And the big studios are all closing pretty much. I mean, Olympic and Psalm West, all the studios that were, everywhere, when I was younger, they've all closed. So I do a bit of work in Dean Street sometimes in London, which is great, which is Tony Visconti's old studio.
Absolutely.
And it's fantastic, and it's so well equipped, and there's a great engineer there. So if I want a bit of that flavor of an outside studio, just get out of my own space for a minute, I usually work there.
Yeah, it's great. I'm walking around. I mean, I'm 10 minutes walk. I'm just by Regent's Park, so 10 minutes walk from all of that sort of stuff. It's all deserted at the moment. It's really just longing for the times when it reopens.
I couldn't believe it because I was sort of driving through London not so long ago, and just there's no one there. It's mad. But it looks like there's light at the end of the tunnel, though, if we're to believe what we hear.
Well, and it's not the train coming towards us. I think you're well. It's hopeful. This is what people are saying, but I know because we work with lots of artists and other bits and pieces as well. I have a company with R.J. Gibb, who's the son of Robin Gibb from the Bee Gees, and they were supposed to be performing a whole tour this time, like many bands were. And still, venues are saying, look, even though things are opening up, we still don't know how it's going to pan out. So we're not, in spite of what they say. I think there's a little way to go yet.
Yeah, well, you think of the money behind something like Genesis reforming and playing arenas and stadiums. I mean, they can't just keep willy-nilly rescheduling the shows and then it be locked down again. I suppose the money's just massive. Yeah. So I guess
and really tough. I mean, you've worked with so many artists. Are there any still on your hit list?
I was saying to someone the other day, actually, that I listened to FK Twigs on Louis Theroux's podcast, which is great, and I listened to that quite a bit. And she was talking about how she saw Adamant in the street in London and had to run up to him and just hug him because she was such a fan. And I thought she sounded great, actually. And I thought, well, we'll probably get on together, at least like a conversation. And I quite like that she's a bit out there and she's quite progressive and very creative, So I just thought it was interesting that she would cite Adam and the Ants as an influence. It really took me by surprise, and I thought, oh, that's interesting.
Well, he's been another brilliant, diverse artist. I saw him. He used to do this thing at the Camden Roundhouse every so often. Last time I saw him was there. And if you look at some of his early stuff, it's very different to the Prince Charmings and Stand and Deliver. The very early Ant music is really quite iconic and a brilliant artist, a great performer.
Oh, brilliant artist. Actually, one of my early singles was Xerox. Remember Xerox?
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that was completely different from the Fame kind of stuff. But I do remember he was another person that I saw as a kid on Top of the Pops. I think it was Dog Eat Dog I saw on Top of the Pops. Yeah. Just thought, what? He's brilliant. Wow. What is that? He was like the sort of 80s Bolan for me, in a way. He was the star personified.
Yeah. And that wonderful, the drums with Marco on the drums and things like that, it really gets you, doesn't it?
It's fantastic. Fantastic record. Kings of the Wild Frontier, it's a great album.
Absolutely. And I think it's that sort of feel where you're trying to be different, but you're the whole package, if you like, because the image was right and the music was right. And it really captured that sort of imagination for the early 80s and great stuff in the 70s as well.
Yeah, it really did, yeah. And he was almost like, Bolan had his own sound. I think Adam and the Ants had that sort of for the 80s as well. They sounded like nothing else,
Yeah. Anybody else? Who else is on your hit list?
Oh gosh, I don't know. It used to be Prince, but I mean, I can't say that anymore.
Amazing. That would have been brilliant, wouldn't it?
That would have been fantastic. I was such a fan of his. What a great, I was very sad when that happened, actually. I thought, gosh, all these years you never want to meet all your heroes. I remember reading an interview with Captain Sensible, and he said, sometimes you meet your heroes and they're arseholes. And he said, but Marc Bolan wasn't. He was great and he was really good to us. And I think sometimes it's great to meet your heroes and that kind of thing, when you're in the business. But it's also good to leave some where they are. And I suppose he should have probably remained where he was and never been met. And now I don't need to worry. Shame.
Did you ever see him in concert?
I did, yeah. Fabulous.
Phenomenal stuff. And I think it works on that sort of going from the 3 minutes hit to here's a song that goes on forever. I saw him a couple of times, and I remember Red Corvette, I think it's probably still going on in like days and days.
Well, you know what? I had tickets to see him at the Forum in LA. Right. And so we arrived, there was like 5 of us. And we sit there, here he comes, and Janelle Monáe was with him. It was fantastic. We were there for like 2 hours, and it was pretty much like jamming, which is fine, it sounded great and it looked great. And so I turned to the people I was with and I said, we should probably head off now. It's like midnight, well past curfew. So they all agreed, yeah, let's go. And we got to the car park and we just heard him say, now we're going to play some hits. And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Stevie Wonder. And we just looked, looked at each other like, what? Left at the wrong time. So
it is.
but he was fantastic.
He was the Ken Dodd of the music world, because Ken Dodd would do a similar thing. He would go on and perform forever. But brilliant stuff. It's wonderful. So I mean, it's there. That was some of the missing things, if you like. And what have been your biggest regrets over what has been a phenomenal career?
Biggest regrets? I don't know, really. I mean, I don't like to have regrets, really. I think, what do they say? You know, on your deathbed, it's not the, what is it? Something like, it's not the, you don't regret the things you did, it's the things you didn't do. And I've sort of ticked a lot of those boxes, actually. I'm essentially a total music obsessive, and I've spent my life doing it, you know. So I wake up every day, actually, when I'm doing music, and I just count my blessings that I'm still doing it. And I think, you know, I hope it continues. I mean, I don't really regret much, really. It's not good to regret, is it?
Oh no, I think
keep
you're
moving forward.
Yeah, I love it, because the fact is you do it. And this is what
Yeah.
I love about it. It's not just saying I have to do this commercially, and therefore I'm going to miss this out. You are probably one of the most diverse people in this sort of industry, because you do work with so many different artists. You do your jingles, you can do your own projects at DBA and so on and so forth. And it makes sense. It's a very satisfying thing. So from that point of view, with everybody that you've worked with, what have been your proudest moments?
I think, you know, the Royal Festival Hall with Marc was a pretty proud moment, actually, because, you know, here we were, we're kind of like kindred spirits in some ways, because we're such Bolan fans and we do get each other musically. Yeah, and just to sort of stand there with him at the end of that 3-hour show, it seems to go on forever, such a lot of material, and just stand with him at the end of the show with sort of arms around each other. It's a beautiful moment, actually. It's an artist that I'd admired for a long time, and I think, you know, there's a mutual kind of sort of respect for each other's work, and it felt very kind of you know, meant to be, I suppose.
Well, they say that the reviews all said that you gelled on stage, which you absolutely do. Eccentric but lovable, I think, was one review. Which
right. Yeah.
But it was brilliant. But I could tell, you could tell when somebody's just really loving it. Marc is a brilliant performer, and the two of you, you were great together. You really seemed to be, this was the moment.
Yeah, it was fantastic. It seemed to sum it all up in a way, you know, and it just felt very natural. I'm sure some journalists probably thought, what are these two doing together? What's all that about? But I think it's very natural. We just like each other's company, and we like creating together. And there's no commercial sort of drive behind it. And I think for me, that's my favorite kind of music. If you can do it for the love of it and not worry about money for a minute, easier said than done. I think that's when I'm the happiest with music, I think.
Yeah, and I think in a way, Chris, it's actually what you want, isn't it? You want journalists and others to say, what on earth are they doing together?
Yeah, I think if you did, what, you know, it's kind of fun. Again, it's like, you know, you should annoy people a little bit sometimes, shouldn't you? Shouldn't be too
instead of being
cozy.
100% everybody happy-ish, you want 97% and 3%. It's that sort of Marmite moment.
Exactly.
I think that's great.
But it's funny, you always read the 3% though, don't you?
Oh no, I tell you,
forget the 90%.
What happens? Everybody can have the best reviews in the world, but it's that one review which is really snotty that they focus on.
Yeah.
It's human.
Oh yeah.
I think sadly, it is extraordinary. Finally, then, and we must get you back because it's absolutely brilliant. I could chat to you all day about all sorts of the artists you've worked with, wonderful influences, all sorts of different things. I love this album, absolutely brilliant, really, really fantastic stuff. It is available. I think it's the CD was released on the 5th of February, so that's available now. I love the artwork as well, because in this there's a DVD showing it being painted.
Yeah, and he's a legend, and he's another person you see, you know. I think if I hadn't worked with Roger Dean, that might have been one regret, but I have now, and he's such a genius. And his artwork is actually, it's just made for vinyl, and the vinyl is coming out on March the 26th, so it's going to look fantastic on vinyl, I think. I can't wait to see it. Yeah, very, very
fantastic. But you're right. But I miss those. I mean, I'm glad that vinyl is sort of coming back, because the digital downloads, you miss some real artistry like this, don't you?
Yeah, Absolutely. It was all about that. It was all about, going into town with your tenner, buying your favorite album or the new album, getting it back on the bus and just obsessing over it. And the thing is, I think the sort of everything's become instant now, which is great. It's great for my kids' generation. They can just hear something instantly. But if I think back to like those days of buying the new music album, I was on holiday in Blackpool and I bought that album from Boots because I'd heard Living by Numbers and World of Water, which I loved. And I got the album and we were on holiday for 2 weeks, so we couldn't hear it. Can you imagine the anticipation? Sat in your hotel room going, God, what does Dead Fish Don't Swim Home sound like? It was magical. It slowed everything down and the anticipation. So I think,
used to have to order
miss
something. Even before that, used to go into Woolies in the good old days and have to wait till it comes in if it's on import for some of these albums. Extraordinary stuff. But no, fascinating. So I'm delighted to see that. It is a brilliant album. I thoroughly recommend it.
Thank you.
And finally, Chris, and it's you're far too young and it's far too early in your career to ask this, but it's always interesting to know, how would you, Chris Braide, like to be remembered?
Like in terms of music or just generally?
In terms of everything. You talk about sometimes we lose people too young. Mark Bolan, the classic sort of example. It's people looking back. It's an opportunity to say, this is what I want people to think of me. This is what, whether it's the music, whether it's people you collaborated with, whether it's you as a person. How would you like to be remembered?
A good friend to his friends, a good dad, good husband, nice to his parents, loves music.
That sounds great. That would fit nicely on a gravestone somewhere. It's a real... Chris, it's been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. It was great.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye. So thank you very much again to Chris Braide for being my guest today. If you have any comments or suggestions for other brilliant guests, write to me at guests@octopustv.com. That's guests@octopustv.com. Don't forget, you can follow me at Andrew Eborn at octopustv and subscribe on all of the usual channels. But for now, thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.